everyone, it's Lynn from Blue Calla Patterns and welcome to video 2 for the Juniper Toiletry Bag. In this video, we're going to start by sewing up our piping. In the pattern, I don't cover sewing your own piping. It's actually easier if you're not really familiar with piping to just buy pre-made piping in a package. And I really like to match my piping to my fabric, so I'm going to make my own, and I'll just show you how I do that. I buy this cotton cording. It's 1/8 of an inch diameter. That's the size that I prefer, but you can use whatever size of cording that you like. I don't like it when it's really, really big on a small bag like this. And I usually use 1/8 of an inch cording for all of the piping that I make. And then I cut some fabric strips. You're supposed to cut them on the bias, especially when you're going around a curved edge like this one. But I did not because I did not have enough fabric, so it should still look okay. But normally you would cut it on the bias so that it goes nicely around curves. If you don't have a piping foot for your machine, you could get away with using a zipper foot. I only have a zipper foot. I don't have a cording foot, so I'm just going to use my zipper foot to do the piping.
Okay, so I have my zipper foot attachment on my machine, and I've tied a knot here just so that my cording doesn't fray. And then it's easier if you press the entire fabric strip in half, wrong sides together, and then you'll have that crease in the middle that you can use as a guide for where to put the cording. But I always worry that that crease is going to show in my final piping, so instead I just place it in the middle, and then I just line up these outer edges, wrong sides together, and then I do a quick basting stitch about 1/8 of an inch away from where the cording is located.
Okay, so this is what the piping looks like, and the important thing to make it easier, I guess, is to make sure that the amount of fabric beside your cording is 3/8 of an inch, and that will actually, because the seam allowance is 3/8 of an inch, it helps you make sure that you're sewing your piping on where it's just the portion with the cording coming out the side seams. So I find when I cut my strips 1 1/4 inch, it ends up being exactly 3/8 of an inch if I'm using 1/8 of an inch cording. So now we're going to take both of our exterior side panels, and I don't want to have the piping go all the way down to the bottom corners. So what I do is I start and I stop 1 inch away from the bottom corners. So I'm just going to make a tiny little mark that I'm going to use as a guide. Okay, and I didn't have exactly a yard of piping, so I'm going to be very careful that I don't use too much on each one so that I have enough for both.
When you start basting the piping to the exterior side panel, you start with the end of your piping lined up with that mark that you made at the bottom corner, and you want a little bit of the piping sticking out the side. So this is the edge that has the cording, and these are the raw edges of your piping. So once you've done a few stitches, you'll want to lift your presser foot and then just rotate the piping so that the raw edge of the piping is lined up with the raw edges of the exterior side panel. Now, when you get to the curves, it's sometimes easier if you clip a little bit in the fabric part of your piping. It really depends on how sharp the curve is. This one isn't too bad, so I'm going to try without. But normally, if it's a really sharp curve, you're going to want to clip into that seam allowance. Not the exterior side panel, only the piping. So now I'm getting close to the mark that I made on the opposite corner, and I'm going to have to angle out the piping at that mark because I don't want it to go all the way to the bottom corner. So I just lift, you can kind of fold the piping here, and then you just make sure that the edge here with the cording is lined up with that mark that you made. Okay, and then I'm going to do the same thing with the second exterior side panel and the rest of the piping.
Okay, so the piping is attached to both of these exterior side panels, and I do see that my piping is sort of flipping upwards along the curved edges. So if you just clip a tiny bit here, it will start to lay flat. And I'm just clipping the piping, I'm not clipping the side panel itself. This will just help when sewing, doing the final assembly. It'll just make it easier if your piping isn't flipping up. So there's the difference here, flipping up and then laying flat. Now we're going to need our exterior zipper facing pieces, and you'll also need the pattern piece. So these are my two pieces. Okay, so what you'll want to do is flip them so that they are wrong sides facing up. And I put a note in the pattern, but it's really important for these next few steps that you pay attention, that you're doing everything mirror image for these two, because if you look at the opening here, it's not quite centered on the pattern piece. It's a little bit more towards the inner edge. So looking at the pattern piece, this will be the inner edges of these exterior zipper facing pieces. Okay, so I realized I was working with an older pattern piece, so I actually made the box smaller. So ignore these marks that I just made and cut out the rectangle box from your exterior zipper facing pattern piece. Okay, so now we're going to use this to make marks on our exterior zipper facing fabric pieces on the wrong side. Place them side by side. Keep in mind this is your inner edges. And then you want the inner edge of the pattern piece to be lined up with the inner edge of the exterior zipper facing piece. So I don't like using the pattern piece to draw the entire rectangle box because the paper will move and you might create a crooked box. And I really think it's important for the openings of your zipper compartments to look nice. So I'm just going to draw the line at the end and then a tiny bit of the line going vertically, just enough so that I can finish it with a ruler. So line at the end and then two tiny short lines. Now, again, I want to make sure that the inner edge of the pattern piece is at the inner edge of the zipper facing piece. So I'm going to flip it so that now it's mirror image, and we do the same thing. So we draw a bit of a line at both ends. Okay, now I'm going to, so I'm sorry it's a bit confusing because I have two sets of marks, but you want the inside marks. And now I'm going to use a ruler and just join the lines here. Whoops. Okay, like this. So I'm keeping them so that they're positioned correctly. This is the inner edge, this is the outer edge. Okay. All right, so now the rectangle boxes are drawn. We can move to the next step. You are going to need your exterior top panel. So this piece is the one that has the fleece and it has the cutouts for these rectangle openings. And then what you're going to do is place these over top. And it's very important that you make sure that the inner edges are in the center of this piece. And you want them, the edges here, to be lined up. Okay, so there is a gap here in the middle. And then if you actually kind of press through, you should feel that there is no fleece beneath this because of that, the little bit of fleece that we cut out for these openings. So if you press, and then you should feel the edge where the fleece starts on the outside of these rectangle boxes. So they should be lined up at the top and the bottom. And then the outer edges of these exterior zipper facings are lined up with this curved outer edge of your exterior top panel. And now we're going to use pins and pin the zipper facing in place. Okay, these are pinned in place, so we're going to go over to the machine and we're going to sew along the lines, the rectangle box lines, and it's easier if you keep your needle in the down position so that it helps with rotating at the corners.
Okay, so sewing around the rectangle box, I'm using a shorter stitch length of 3, and I'm going to be keeping my needle in the down position. Okay, so once it's you've sewn around the rectangle box, you can turn it over and just have a look, and you should see that your stitching is inside that opening that you left in the fleece, the rectangle cut out in the fleece. So your stitching should be inside there. And I'm doing the same for the second.
Okay, so I've sewn along both of the rectangle boxes, and now what we're going to do is we need to cut an opening in the center of these boxes. So um, the first thing we're going to do is draw a line horizontally through the center of those rectangle boxes. And then you can draw, and you don't go all the way to the ends, maybe half an inch from each end. And then you draw a diagonal line that goes from that center line to each of the four corners. Do the same for this one. Okay, so now we're going to cut this out. And I use a rotary cutter to do the center line, but if you do that, just be careful that you don't go too far. When you're doing this, you have to make sure that you don't cut any of the stitching for the rectangle box. Otherwise, you're going to ruin the whole thing and have to probably restart. Okay, so then I do the center line with my rotary cutter, and then I'm going to use a really sharp pair of scissors to do the diagonal lines. And when you do these diagonal lines, the key to doing it correctly is to cut as close as you can to the stitching at the corners, but without actually cutting any of the stitches. So I don't rush through this step, I take my time. Okay, and then we're going to need to get our iron and our ironing board, and we're going to pull these through and press them on the wrong side. Okay, so we're going to, I'll start by the one closest to me. And this part does take a little bit of time, and I really don't like rushing it. So you're pulling the facing towards the wrong side. And then I like to roll the seam between my fingers and then press little sections at a time. And that will create a nice rectangle opening. I'm going to show you a little trick in a bit to keep those facings in place once you've got them towards the wrong side. So little portions at a time. And then you roll that seam allowance and then you press. Okay, once I have it done from the right side, I flip it over and I do it again from the wrong side. Now, one little tip that one of my testers gave me was that if you want it to help stay in place, you can just use a little bit of glue, regular glue stick. And then I'm also, so you see how it kind of just stays nice in place. And just going to use some clips to hold that. And I'm going to do the same for this side. I should have done that, the glue, before I put the clips. So this is just a regular glue stick. It's not fabric glue or anything like that. And you don't need a lot. It just helps it to stay in place. Okay, and then I'm just going to do exactly the same thing for the zipper facing on this side. Okay, so this is ready, and I'm just going to set it aside while we continue with the next steps. So now you're going to need your inner zipper panel pieces and your zippers. So the inner zipper panel pieces are the ones that don't have a curved edge. So they're just straight rectangles. And to make sure again that you're creating two sets mirror image, it's better if we do both at the same time. Now, the important thing here is to make sure that your zipper pulls are going in the same direction. So in my case here, so the rounded edges here, I want those pointing in the same direction. And you want your inner zipper panels right side facing up, and your zippers should also be right side facing up. And you want one zipper to be along the right side of your zipper panel and the other one to be on the left side of the zipper panel. And then I'm just going to use a couple of clips to hold these in place. And then we're going to sew them to the zipper with 1/4 inch seam allowance along the edge, obviously, that has the zipper. And just make sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end. So 1/4 inch seam allowance and backstitching at the beginning and the end. And please do make sure, double check that your pulls are going in the same direction. And your zippers are on opposite sides of these inner zipper panel pieces. Okay, so now I'm going to go over to the machine and sew these in place. Okay, so the zippers are sewn to the zipper panel pieces. Now we're going to press these away from the zippers. Okay, so now that these are attached, we're going to take our outer zipper panel pieces. So you're going to place this one like this, right side facing up, and I want the curved edge to be on this side. And then for this one, you're doing the opposite mirror image, okay? Then you're going to take these pieces, the zipper with attached inner panel, and you're going to place them on top like so. So you want that zipper to be aligned with the straight edge of the outer zipper panel, and very important, but you want the top and the bottom edges to be lined up. Okay, so if you look, these edges are lined up. And then you're going to clip them together, hold them in place. So I usually do the ends because I really want to make sure those are lined up. And then so lined up, and then I clip in the middle. Okay, so there's one side, and then I'm doing the same for this side here. So start by lining up the lining pieces, and the edge of the zipper is lined up with the straight edge of that outer zipper panel. And then you add some clips in between. And then again, we're going to sew the zipper to these outer zipper panels with 1/4 inch seam allowance, so along these outer edges, and make sure that you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so now we're going to also press these away from the zipper. Okay, and the other like this. So my zipper pulls are both going in this direction, and we have two that are identical but mirror image. Now you're going to need your zipper end panel pieces, and you should have two sets mirror image. You're going to be attaching one mirror image set to this one and one mirror image set to this one. So we're going to now flip them so that we can see the right sides. And you'll notice that the zipper panel end piece, the zipper end panel, the zipper end panel, that was very difficult for me. So the zipper end panel has a straight edge here and a curved edge here. So we actually want that curved edge to be along the curved side of the zipper panel pieces. So this one will go this way because when we flip it, see, we want that curved edge to be along this curved edge. So I'm just going to line that up with these edges and clip them together. And then the mirror image piece for this one is going to go here. And again, that curved side is along the curved side of this zipper panel. Okay, and then I'm doing the same thing with this set and this zipper panel. Okay, so now I'm going to go over to the machine and I'm going to sew the zipper end panel pieces at each end, and I'm going to use my regular 3/8 of an inch seam allowance to sew these in place, and make sure that you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so these zipper end panels are sewn on, and now we're just going to press them away from the zipper. And now I'm going to go over them to the machine, and I'm just going to top stitch all 4 seam allowances. Okay, so this is what we have now. And you'll notice we have a tiny bit of extra zipper. We can actually go ahead and trim that, but whenever you trim a zipper, you absolutely must seal the ends. I prefer sealing with heat, so I use a lighter. Once you have it attached to fabric, though, you want to make sure that your fabric doesn't catch on fire. So I never ever cut zipper tape without sealing it afterwards. Never. Okay, so now these are ready. Okay, so now before we continue, we're going to mark some centers, and that's going to help us when we're doing the final assembly. So for your assembled zipper panels, so you want to just fold them in half, right sides together, and we want the center on both sides, so of your exterior and inner zipper panel. So we do that for both. Okay, for this as well, our exterior top panel, right sides together. And I'm going to take off my clips actually because they're interfering. It's pretty important to get your center marks as accurate as possible. Okay, so fold this in half, and you just need that center mark here on the along that curved outer edge, like so. Just gonna do a little bit of a better job because my zipper facings were in the way. That one is done. And then your exterior side panel pieces. Now, I already have these because when I cut my foam pieces, I actually don't cut on the fold. I I cut out half and then I flip it and then I cut out the other half. And when I do that, I mark the centers just so that I know that I'm flipping the pattern piece in half perfectly, like I'm flipping it over right at the center point. And then the last thing that we want to mark are our 4 lining pieces. That's these ones. And we want to fold them in half like this, right sides together, and we want that center mark along the top here on the wrong side. So right here. And we do the same for all 4 pieces. So now we're going to sew the lining zipper panels to the exterior top panel. So start by placing them like so. Okay. Mirror image and the pulls going in the same direction. Super important. Then you're going to take this and place it over top. So these do need to be, take out my pressing mat. So I have a nice flat surface. Okay, and I do want these lined up very well. And then when you're placing these, here's where our center marks come into play. You want to have these center marks lined up and these center marks lined up. Okay, and then you can use some wash away tape if you want to make sure that none of the layers shift at all, but I just end up using clips or pins or whatever I have on hand. We're not going to be sewing these together. This is just to keep everything in place. So this is a bit of it's a bit fiddly in that you really want to make sure that those zippers are nicely centered in the rectangle opening. So I'll kind of speed the video up a little bit here as I finish this because it does take a wee bit of time to get this all pinned in place properly.
So now I'm going to sew the zippers in place, and I'm going to sew all along the outside of the rectangle boxes with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm going to keep my needle in the down position to help when I rotate at the corners. Make sure that you move your pull out of the way as you come near it so that it doesn't interfere with your stitching. So one zipper sewn in place, and I'm just going to go ahead and do the same for the second.
Okay, so we have our zippers attached now to the exterior top panel, and we're actually going to stop here for this video, and in video 3 we'll complete the assembly of our bag.